What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this video, I'm going to be bringing you another endgame build, this time for the bow. Now as always, what is an endgame build? Well, it's a build that is constructed from the rarest armor, weaponry, and decorations in the game. They do feature talismans, and they do have a little bit of Krios Crafting on them, but it's not to the extent where they're really unobtainable by only having rare skills attached to the armor through this augmentation system. Now when it comes to the bow, some of you may know it's my favourite weapon. A weapon that is capable of dishing out a ton of damage, both raw and elemental, is able to bring down monsters quickly. But one of the major issues with the bow is its fragile nature. Being only able to take a few hits before you cut, you have to normally rely on your dodges to avoid injury. And so with that I present to you the Embolden Bow build. This build is supposed to minimise and reduce the amount of incoming damage against our hunter. But whilst it does have survival aspects to it, it is also still capable of dishing out damage and bringing monsters down quickly. So for this you'll need the Risen Mizua headdress, the Omnio Kariginu, the Omnio Teku, the Omnio Ateobi, and the Flaming Espinas heals. For your petalice this is down to personal preference, but as this is a survival focused build, I'd recommend going for the absolute petalice for some extra health. For your talisman, you want to have a talisman that has at least weakness exploit level 2 on it, whether this is through the skills or the decoration slots. Additional decoration slots are also desired. Now when it comes to the bow, for the purpose of this demonstration I'm going to be showing off a water build, so I'm using the Chale Warbow, which is the Daimyo Hermital bow. Remember, I tend to focus on spread arrows as they suit my personal playstyle, but this build will work with whatever arrow type you like. This build is also interchangeable with the other elements, so in the case of the spread arrow bows, if you wanted to use the fire element, I'd recommend going for the Rathian bow. If you want to go for the thunder element, use the Kezu bow. If you want to go for the ice element, use the Barioth bow. And if you want to use the dragon element, either go for the gold Rathian bow or the Valstrax bow. As for the Krios Crafting on the bows, if they don't have access to a tier 3 decoration slot, I recommend getting that first, followed by elemental up, attack up, and affinity. But to be honest, it is kind of down to personal preference. As for the actual rampage decoration, you'll either want to go for the Daora Soul Jewel, which will boost our affinity when we're attacking constantly. You can also go for Elemental Bane, which will increase damage when we're fighting monsters who are severely weak to elemental damage. And failing that, you can also use any of the anti-species decorations if you so wish. And speaking of decorations, you have a fair few to play around with, and there are quite a few mandatory ones, shall we say. To be honest, most of the optional jewels are found on our bows. So as the Daimyo Hermital bow has a lot of decoration slots, these are optional. I've gone for jumping decorations to give us a few points in evade extender, a physique jewel to give us an extra point in the constitution skill, a quick load jewel for a point in quick load. You'll then want to go for spread decorations to max out spread up. Remember, if you're using a different bow with a different arrow type, you would replace these spread decorations with either 4-shot decorations if you want to increase the damage of rapid fire arrows, or piercing decorations if you want the pierce up skill for piercing arrows. We've then gone for critical jewels to max out crit boost, mighty bow jewel for the bow charge plus skill, this is a must for all bows, cornerstone jewels to max out the Defiance skill, attack jewels to get attack boost to at least level 4, a blade scale jewel for a point in the blade scale skill, and then finally stream jewels to max out water attack. Remember, if you're using a different bow with a different element, you replace these stream jewels to max out whatever new element you are using. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a raw attack of 419 with a water rating of 42. You'll have 0% base affinity, but this can potentially be 65% when you take into account both weakness exploit and the agitator skills. And you'll have a strong defense of 768 that is strong against fire, but unfortunately slightly weak to the other elements. As for your switch skills, I tend to favour Dodge Bolt as the most mandatory, the rest are down to personal preference. So when it comes to the skills, first of all you'll have Agitator at level 5. Agitator is a skill that whenever a monster becomes enraged, will gain increased raw attack as well as bonus affinity. You'll also have Water Attack at level 5. This will increase the water rating and thus the water damage of this build, making it great for taking down monsters who are weak to the water element. Remember, if you're using a different bow with a different element, you would replace Water Attack with whatever new element you're using. So say you're using a fire bow, you'll have Fire Attack at level 5 instead. Anyway, you'll then have Defiance at level 5. Defiance is a wonderful skill that when a monster becomes enraged, it will nullify all monster roars, wind effects and dragon wind effects, as well as tremors, and give us a bonus 30 defense. You'll then have Attack Boost at level 3. Attack Boost is a skill that increases the raw attack of a build, and at level 4 or above gives us a percentage bonus to our raw attack. You'll then have peak performance at level 3, increasing our raw attack whenever our health is full. You'll then have critical boost at level 3, increasing the damage of our critical hits, but will only apply to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental portion. You'll then have weakness exploit at level 3, which allows attacks against monster weak points to have their affinity increased by 50%. You'll then have Constitution at level 3. This may be level 2 for some of you depending on what bow you are using. Constitution is a skill that reduces the stamina cost of certain actions like firing the bow. You'll then have Stamina Surge at level 3, which is a skill that increases how quickly we can regain our stamina. You'll then have Spread Up at level 3, increasing the damage of spread arrows. Remember, if you're using a different bow with a different arrow type, you would replace Spread Up to match whatever new arrow type you were using. So if you had rapid fire bows, you would have Normal Up, or if you're using piercing arrows, you would have Pierce Up in level 3 instead. Anyway, you'll then have Embolden at level 3, which is what this build is named after. Basically, when you are targeted by a monster, the monster becomes more likely to become enraged, but your own defenses will be increased. So it's easier for you to enrage a monster by reducing the actual damage threshold needed to make the monster become enraged. This works slightly better in solo play, but regardless, when a monster becomes enraged, you'll get an additional 40 defense, as well as greatly increasing the invincibility frames when we're performing dodges. It would also lower impacts if we're guarding, but we're using a bow and the bow can't guard. But as you can see, Embolden, being able to enrage a monster more easily, not only gives us the added defense, but it allows us to activate Defiance as well as Agitator more easily, so we can get these buffs active for the majority of a hunt. All three of these skills combined and working in unison with one another not only increase our survivability, but also our overall damage output. Anyway, you'll then have Burst at level 3. To be honest, going for level 3 is a little bit overkill, but it's part of the armor I'm using. Burst is a skill, formerly known as Chain Crit, that when we continuously land hits against a monster, it will gradually increase our raw attack and elemental attack. You'll then have Reload Speed at level 2, which may be level 1 for some of you out there, which automatically allows us to equip bow coatings. To be honest, you can drop this skill if you're using a bow that has very few coatings on it. Anyway, next up is Evade Extender at level 2. This may be level 1 for some of you out there depending on the bow you're using and the decorations available to you. Evade Extender is nonetheless a useful defensive and quality of life skill that increases the distance at which we evade and dodge, helping us as hunters keep out of harm's way. You'll then have Bow Charge Plus at level 1, which is a skill that allows our maximum bow charge level to be increased by 1. This overall increases our damage when we're dash dancing, and on top of that, you'll notice that when you're crafting bows, the bottom arrow level is normally grayed out. Bow Charge Plus will unlock this for you. Anyway, you'll then have Evade Window at level 1, which is a byproduct of our armor. It's not really needed, but it is still useful as it increases the invincibility frames when we're dodging and such, but to be honest, it's kind of wasted when Embolden is active. You'll then have Poison Resistance at level 1, again another byproduct. This reduces the number of times you take poison damage should you be afflicted by the ailment. You'll then have Adrenaline Rush at level 1, which is a useful offensive skill that when we perform a perfectly timed evade, will gain a temporary raw attack boost. And as this build has slightly more defense than the average bow build, you can risk activating this a little bit more comfortably than with other builds on the market. Anyway, you'll then have Spirit Bird Call at level 1, which is a useful quality of life skill that allows random spirit birds to come to our hunter at fixed intervals. This doesn't apply to arena quests, but it reduces the need to go out of your way to find spirit birds whilst you're on a hunt. You'll then have Blade Scale Hone at level 1, which is a useful damage skill for the bow that when we perform a perfectly timed dodge, our close range coatings will have their damage increased. And then finally you'll have Intrepid Heart at level 1. This is another defensive skill for the bow to help keep our hunter alive. Basically, above your health bar you'll notice a blue bar starting to fill up as you deal damage. Once full, it will negate damage reactions as well as reduce damage taken from a single attack that would knock your hunter back. This helps keep our hunter alive a little bit more and is a fun little mechanic, and the bow is quite capable of easily filling up the little blue bar. So those are all the major skills available to this build. Let's move on to the next section where we talk about Krios Crafting. Now, like I said, these builds do feature Krios Crafting. It is an endgame mechanic after all. But it doesn't feature Krios Crafting to the extent where every piece of armor has, say, weakness exploit, attack boost, critical boost, so on and so forth. Most of the upgrades through this augmentation system you see on these builds and these videos have been obtained with very little farming. Most of the time I go for decoration slot upgrades above skills, as it allows for more customization with your builds. So for the Risen Mizu headdress, I've got a tier 1 decoration slot upgrade with the Omnio Caraginu. I've got a tier 4 decoration slot and a tier 3 decoration slot upgrade. This was probably one of the rarer augmentations achieved in this build. Anyway, for the Omnio Teku, I've got a point in attack boost. For the Omnio Ateobi, I've got a point in burst. And then for the Flaming Espinas heals, I've got the Spirit Bird core skill as well as a tier 2 decoration upgrade and an additional tier 1 decoration slot. So there is a little bit of rare Krios Crafting on this build, but like I said, it wasn't the most unobtainable. And I'm sure with Krios Crafting you may get skills that free up decoration slots to which you can replace with skills or other aspects that you miss. So that is the Embolden build. But you have to remember that every build out there comes with various pros and cons. No build is absolutely perfect. Even these endgame ones have flaws, whether it's through their crafting or through actual downsides in the build itself. No build is perfect. When it comes to the Embolden Bow build, its biggest pro is its survivability. Having the extra defense, invincibility frames, and more, it means we're able to survive hunts a little bit more effectively, at least for a bow build. On top of that, this build still has decent damage output. So long as you're taking into account a monster's elemental weakness, you should be able to bring down monsters in a reasonable time. And the final pro is that this build has loads of skills that synergize extremely well together. For example, Emboldened, the namesake skill of this build, it enables you to enrage monsters, which in turn activates Defiance and Agitator. So the skills all work well with one another. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons for this build is unfortunately it's a decoration heavy build, meaning that you'll need some rare decorations for it to work. And the other con is, unfortunately, Krios Crafting and rare talismans are kinda needed for this build to work. Like I said, it's not the absolute rarest of the rare, but it's still a con against this build, in all honesty. But these are endgame builds and something to work towards, and should you be able to craft this Embolden build, you're gonna have a very comfortable bow build in your hands that should be able to take on the absolute hardest content in the game so far, with more survivability than other bow builds, whilst at the same time still being able to bring down monsters with that decent damage output. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you the Embolden Bow build in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.